It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life. From the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Fred Schofield. Hi, Fred. How are you?
Great, Doug. How about yourself?
Doing very well. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. Looking at your bio here, I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. It says you spent your early life in the U.S. Marines and was decorated for valor under enemy
fire. That's actually...
was
in a place called the Anhua Valley in Vietnam, which was designated by the Marine Corps as a free fire zone, which essentially means you can kill just about anything that isn't dressed like a Marine. And on the other side, they were doing the same to us. But that's actually how these books come back to us, is from the second day I was in Vietnam, December 3rd, 1968. On that day, I was on patrol. I carried a radio. And as I was taking my first walk on a patrol of Vietnam, I asked the Marine ahead of me, "What's this stuff all over our boots?" And he turned to me and said, "Don't worry about it. It just kills the plants so we can spot the people that are trying to kill us," which seemed like a nice notion. And then close to 50 years later, as I was laying in a hospital bed with my third surgical procedure, following that procedure for exposure to Agent Orange, I got a call from an editor. And she's been a longtime friend. And she said to me, "Freddie, have you seen what's happening at Amazon with the books that you had published 20 years ago?" Now, I had published a couple of books about 20 years ago, and they sold pretty well. They sold 20,000 copies, got good critical reviews, but the little publishing house that put them out ran out of money and went out of business before it could get to a second printing. And at the time, I had a busy law practice. I was a criminal defender, and I went back to that and never really thought much about it. So when I received a call from my editor pal, I took a look at Amazon, and you can still find the first editions at prices running $199 used. That's $199 used, and $340 new. There aren't many copies out there, but apparently they're selling at those prices. So I thought that was pretty amazing, and I was encouraged to take a look at two of these books, which I always thought were terrific titles. And one of them is called The Boardwalkers. And The Boardwalkers, I think, is a terrific story, and so do readers. It has some great reviews up right now at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Goodreads.com, are running 4.8 out of 5 stars, which I think is terrific for an author. Very pleased with it, very happy with some of the reviews. They're really well written, well thought out. But that story emerges from my days in Atlantic City as a criminal defender. Once I returned from the Marine Corps, finished college, went to the law school, and hung a shingle and practiced criminal law, with a little help along the way from some other lawyers that I had worked with. But at one point in my life, going back a few years, I was defending more sex workers in Atlantic City than any other lawyer, meaning I was basically representing more hookers than any lawyer in the world. That's how big a situation it was back then. And from those days, and from those stories, and from the people I met at that time, on the bench, in the courtrooms, on the streets, in the casinos, from those days emerged a story called The Boardwalkers, which is a 70-year legal thriller and mystery romp that goes through that town, told in a way that only somebody who knew the inner workings of the city would know it. And that one has been well received particularly among readers, and very happy with the way that is going. It tells the story of a criminal lawyer charged with a brutal murder of his wife, who comes head-to-head with a mafia boss. The story goes back over 70 years, starting with when Tony Quickfish DeBono, the mob boss, arrives from the Gargano region of Italy and takes a place in the then growing Italian community, which is a big part of Atlantic City. It tells you about the underbelly of the town. It tells you about the court system, which itself is very quirky. A lot of lawyers are afraid to even try cases in that town because you don't know what to expect unless you expect it and know about it. So that was the Boardwalkers. The other tale that's out there and doing very well also comes from personal experience. This is a story called A Run to Hell, and it is truly a run to hell. It comes to me through personal contacts, through family, and through contacts I had practicing law in the city of Philadelphia. It tells the story of a mob lawyer and a counterpart for him, a female counterpart, an immigrant from Panama who comes to this country as a young girl and becomes a special agent in the FBI. The characters have intriguing backstories that motivate them to take a joint CIA and FBI operation in Panama. The backstories basically involve situations that I knew all about. Lee Gunther, who was the lawyer that we're talking about, the criminal lawyer in Philadelphia who does mob work, has a problem with the death and, in fact, Mafia assassination of a public figure that we all know about. And it's a story that is true to life, just as Jamie Calero, the FBI agent's backstory, is also true to life. Grace Kelly, you may recall as an actress who won the Academy Award for Best Actress in a picture called The Country Girl way back in 1954. At that time, she was billed as the girl next door with sexual allure, which gave her impact on the screen. And she principally starred with folks who are leading men who are 20 years older than her. One of them was Cary Grant in a picture that she did in Monaco called To Catch a Thief. And in that movie, Alfred Hitchcock had her filmed driving on a roadway called the Moyenne Corniche. The Moyenne Corniche is a highway that comes close to deep ravines and not big, it's not really well guarded from falling off. We'll come back to that. But Grace left Hollywood. She gave up her Hollywood career to marry of Monaco and to become the Princess of Monaco. A real-life fairy tale story coming true. And I knew about the story, not just because I read about it in the papers, but my father grew up next door to Grace. He was one of her best friends and playmates as they grew up. And my father's brother, my uncle, was best friends of Grace's brother, Kel, Jack B. Kelly Jr., who became a prominent Philadelphia city councilman and president of the U.S. Olympic Committee. Grace Kelly met her death by driving off the Moyenne Corniche, the same highway where she was filmed with Cary Grant. Went down a steep ravine and was dead within 3 days. Her brother, Jack Kelly, and their brother-in-law, the two of them were killed on Philadelphia streets in real life within 6 hours and 12 blocks of each other. Philadelphia newspapers at the time declared, "It's so strange, we don't know what happened. There's a cause of death unknown." A Run to Hell tells the story. It's the story of Philadelphia mob involvement with the Mafia family from Nice, France. The story spells it all out and tells you how not only Grace was killed, but how the other two fellows, who died 18 months later, laying dead on city corners, how they died as well, and what caused that to happen. That's the motivation. That becomes the motivation for Lee Gunther, the hero and the male hero in A Run to Hell, who learns how it happened through his involvement with Kel and other characters that are, some of them from real life in Philadelphia. In fact, there's two transgendered figures in Philadelphia that show up in the book. And we're talking back to a point in time when that was not really a big thing. We're going back to the 80s when there wasn't real well promoted support for people in that community like we have today. But among them was a girl who makes it into the book, a young lady who is still living, who was called at the time Rachel Harlow. She had changed her name after a well-publicized, and she was out there, a well-publicized sexual change, a change in sexual identity. And she becomes a character in the book because of her close connection to Kel. And also there's another transgendered female in the book, which I think comes to life because Rachel Harlow played such a big part in her connection with Jack Kelly. In fact, if you look them up on the internet, you can still find stories about these deaths. Reader's Digest, for instance, has an article running called 11 Unanswered Questions about the Death of Princess Grace Kelly. And Run to Hell gives the answers to all of them. Jamie Calero, now here is a terrific character. She is the strongest character in the book, a tough woman who comes from an immigrant family in Panama and arrives to this country as a young girl, but not before she suffered a tremendous loss, and the loss is of her godfather, her compadre, which is a big deal in the culture of Central America, and perhaps among many cultures, but particularly so down there. Her compadre in real life, Dr. Hugo Spadafora, who was a physician, a medical doctor who was also a guerrilla who fought for different forces, including forces in the Central American region, came to have a battle with Manuel Noriega. And the way that her godfather was killed is actually recorded. The actual death itself was something that was recorded on an CIA interception of an intercontinental call from Panama to Manuel Noriega's place in France. And the trouble those people had, the traumas that Lee Gunther has from his association with the mob doings in Philadelphia, and the problems that Jamie Calero has from her association with her godfather, who was taken care of by Manuel Noriega, motivate them to join and accept joining in a Run to Hell, which is a joint CIA and FBI operation prior to the 1989 U.S. military invasion of Panama in an attempt to take out Manuel Noriega or have him surrender to U.S. authorities on drug charges. Now, that's something that also comes home because my mentor in the criminal law, the guy who taught me how to try criminal cases, was a lawyer in Philadelphia named Raymond J. Takeoff. Ray was one of 3 lawyers who represented Noriega when U.S. authorities indicted them in 2 federal district courts in Florida. They tried to get him to come back, Noriega. They tried to get him to surrender. Ray was involved in those discussions and those negotiations, but Noriega refused to come. Ray is later involved in real life. Ray was later involved in the largest sting operation ever in the federal district court system. Ray was a drug lawyer. He left Philadelphia, went down to open an office in the Miami area. And in the course of representing different dealers and people associated with the drug community, Ray came into contacts that ultimately had him close enough to represent Noriega. But Ray also had some other issues, and it ended up that Ray was recruited rather strong-armedly by the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI into engaging in a plan where Ray was offering bribes to U.S. district magistrates, federal judges, and state judges on the behalf of drug dealers, all in a scheme to find out how bad that problem was in South Florida. And as it turned out, Ray Takeoff ended up as a principal witness and testifier in a program that had more judges and magistrates indicted than ever happened before. And to this date, there's never been a scheme that was more successful in grabbing dirty judges off the federal bench. The same is true with what happened in the Dade County court system and up north of the next county north that takes in Palm Beach and those areas. But anyway, Ray had a big part to play in a number of things. He also had a big part to play in telling me how to address Manuel Noriega as a character in A Run to Hell. In fact, Lee Gunther, our hero in our book, the protagonist, one of our two heroes, our guy hero, has conversations with Manuel Noriega, as does Jamie Calero. And the content of those conversations comes from stories that Ray was able to tell me. How the guy reacted, what he looked like, what he felt like, what it smelled like to be in a room with the most ruthless dictator in the Western Hemisphere. And not only a drug dealer, but a guy who was in partnership with the Medellin drug cartel run by Pablo Escobar up until the time that the DEA took him out. It's a big story. It's a great story. It's a moving story, and it's a heartfelt story. The difference I found between writing these stories and getting them in front of readers today, as opposed to what happened 20 years ago, is a matter of perspective. I think as you grow older, you begin to have feelings and an appreciation for things that perhaps you overlook as a younger person. And with the benefit of that kind of insight, which comes with just growing older, its characters flushed out as being much deeper. Indeed, as my editor friend said, Fred, you've suddenly gotten pithy. But the stories, I'm told the stories are compelling. That shows up in the reviews.
Okay, well, Fred, we've got to wrap this up. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. I'd like people to try out Frederick Schofield. Schofield is spelled SCHOFIELD.com, Frederick-Schofield.com, or easier yet, go directly to Amazon.com or any of the other booksellers, but Amazon in particular has a very great website for my books, and you can take a look at all of them. I think you'll really enjoy taking A Run to Hell, and I think you'll have a ball strolling with the Boardwalkers, which is one of my favorites, which I think is my favorite of a lot of readers.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Best of luck with the books. I hope they do well.
All right, thanks. Terrific. Good talking with you. And I will be looking for you you're online, I take it also. And I will look for that as well as on the radio in Las Vegas. Thanks so much.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records. And it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Epps, E-P-P-S, at talk, T-A-L-K, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you. Bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of The Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
To the